There is a belief so deeply wired into the way we see people that most of us never stop to question it. We tell ourselves that emotional strength looks like stillness, that the ones who have it all together are the ones who never crack, that tears are weakness wearing a human face. But here is what the science of emotion reveals, and it will quietly rearrange the way you see people. The emotionally strongest people you will ever meet, they cry. Sometimes easily, sometimes often, and not because they are falling apart, because they are deeply, powerfully whole. Think about that for a second. We are raised in a world that treats vulnerability like a liability. Somewhere between childhood and adulthood, most people learn to mute their emotional responses. They build walls. They go numb to protect themselves, and they mistake that numbness for toughness. But emotional numbness is not strength. It is armor that slowly suffocates the person wearing it. The people who have done the real internal work, who have faced their pain, processed their grief, sat with their discomfort instead of running from it, those people often have a lower threshold for tears. And that threshold is not a flaw. It is a sign of what psychologists call emotional fluency. The ability to feel fully, respond authentically, and move through emotion without being swallowed by it. Here is what most people miss entirely. Crying is not a loss of control. For emotionally intelligent people, it is precise control. They have developed such an honest relationship with their inner world that their body responds honestly. A moving piece of music, a stranger's act of kindness, watching someone they love succeed, these things move them not because they are fragile, but because they have stopped blocking the signal. The average person spends enormous energy keeping emotion at arm's length, not feeling too much, not showing too much, not letting anything get all the way in. And that containment comes at a cost, because what you suppress does not disappear. It accumulates. It shows up as distance in relationships, as irritability without a clear source, as a vague sense of emptiness that follows you from room to room. Emotionally strong people have a very different relationship with that cost. They do not suppress, they process, and crying is part of that process. But that is not the full picture, because there is another layer here that gets almost no attention. Tears are not just emotional release. They are a form of empathic resonance. When someone cries easily, it often means they are unusually sensitive to the emotional states of others. They feel things outside of themselves, not just within. Researchers refer to this as affective empathy, and in its developed form, it is one of the rarest and most quietly powerful capacities a human being can have. The person who tears up when their friend describes a difficult week is not overreacting. They are receiving. They have the emotional bandwidth to hold space for someone else's experience as if it were their own. And in a world where most people are too distracted or too defended to truly feel what others are going through, that is extraordinary. The next part is where it gets revealing. Many people who cry easily are also the most emotionally stable people in the room. This seems like a contradiction. It is not. The connection is internal regulation. People who have done the work to understand themselves, to know their triggers, to name their feelings with precision, to sit with discomfort without catastrophizing, they do not fear their own emotions. Which means when emotion arises, they do not brace against it. They let it move through them. This is emotional agility. The concept comes from the field of acceptance and commitment psychology, and it describes the ability to experience emotion without being defined by it. Tears flow, and then they pass. The person remains anchored. They are not overwhelmed. They were simply present. Compare that to the person who prides themselves on never crying, who sees composure as identity. In many cases, what you are actually observing is emotional rigidity, the inability to tolerate feeling without shutting down. And when life eventually delivers something that breaks through those walls, because it always does, the result is not calm, it is collapse. There is a reason therapists tend to view emotional expression as a sign of progress. When someone who has spent years disconnected from their own feeling finally cries in a session, that is not breakdown, that is breakthrough. The wall came down, contact was made, healing became possible. This is where people usually get it wrong. They confuse the visible with the real. They see tears and read fragility. They see a stoic face and read strength. But emotionally, surface and substance are rarely the same thing. The person sitting across from you who tears up watching a documentary about someone's quiet act of courage, that person has capacity, depth, connection to something human that refuses to go numb. And the person who smirks and says, "It's just a video." There is often something defended in there, something that long ago learned to keep feeling safely out of reach. And that becomes even more interesting when you look at relationships. Emotionally strong people who cry easily tend to build the deepest connections because they signal safety. When you are around someone who is not afraid of their own emotion, you relax. You lower your own defenses. You stop performing. Real intimacy is not built on shared stoicism. It is built on shared vulnerability, the kind that feels safe because the other person is not flinching. There is a concept in relational psychology called co-regulation, the way two people's nervous systems attune to each other. People who are emotionally open and expressive often have a grounding effect on those around them. Not because they are louder or more intense, but because their authentic presence invites others to be real. And authentic presence is, quietly, one of the most rare and powerful things a human being can offer another. So what does this mean practically? It means the next time you see someone moved to tears by something beautiful, by something kind, by something true, do not read that as weakness. Read it as a signal. You are likely looking at someone with a developed inner world, someone who has chosen presence over protection, someone who feels life at a depth that most people have learned to avoid. And if you are the person who cries easily, who has spent years wondering if something is wrong with you, if you feel too much, if you are somehow built wrong for this world, understand this. Your capacity to feel is not a malfunction. It is rare. In a culture that teaches people to close down, you stayed open. In a world that rewards people for performing strength, you chose something quieter and harder, the real version of it. Emotional strength is not about how little you feel. It has never been about that. It is about how honestly you feel, how completely you process. how fully you stay in contact with your own life and with the lives of the people around you. That is what the tears are. Not weakness leaving the body, not a loss of control, but proof, quiet, certain, undeniable, that someone is still present, still connected, still whole. And in a world that is slowly learning to confuse armor for strength, that kind of wholeness may be the rarest thing of all.